discuss this further, I'm joined by international relations expert Brooks Spector. Brooks, good morning to you.
Good to be with you.
Is America still the role model of democracy in the world?
Well, for a lot of people it is. For some people, of course, it is not. And the big competing version of things for a lot of people around the world may well be the model of China, in which decisions are made by a technocratic elite on what is best for a nation by their lights and then implemented. But even in a place like China, there is now a growing debate about the economic processes that have to be followed going forward. Do they want to continue to try to manage things centrally, or as the new president of China, Xi Jinping, is in fact trying to do, to create more economic issue democracy, but not, interestingly, political democracy? You compare that to a place like India, which is a roiling, confounding, confusing democratic state, but which has always managed to maintain a democratic process, and on the whole has also managed to move its economic clock forward as well. But to get back to your central question, democracy in America is not, after all, an endpoint. It's not like the final station on a railroad. It's the process of this fighting about what constitutes the right vision, whether it be economic, political, or social.
And that process in America has been going on for more than 200 years in terms of democracy and the efforts to do so. But we've seen recently examples like what Simon Marks was referring to in the report that we've just seen here on eNCA, when the government came to a halt late last year in America because the Republicans and the Democrats couldn't agree on a way forward. Is that democracy?
Well, I mean, you could argue, and I think I tend to, that represents the very, very sharp point of the democratic process, the disagreement about principles. There are always there's going to be fallout, there's going to be consequences, and one of the consequences was a sense around the world that the democratic process in America has come off the tracks.
Okay, so democracy is not really about agreeing with each other all the time. Disagreement is very much part of a healthy democracy.
The democratic process is essentially about different people disagreeing and a mechanism or a set of mechanisms to try to modulate those disagreements within a certain set of limits. In other words, you don't show up one morning with the stormtroopers to take over.
Yeah, but is it dangerous that you get a point where there's no consensus over that kind of an issue, for instance, in America that happened last year?
Well, I mean, historically, there have been points along the continuum where there was no consensus about fundamental issues. In the late 1850s, just before the Lincoln's Gettysburg Address, there was in fact a fundamental breakdown about the nature of freedom. Did it extend to all people or only to people with much lighter skins than others? And if the one was true, then one model of democracy would hold. If the other, then there was civil war.
One would argue and say that the civil rights movement in America added a lot of richness in the American democracy that we know today.
Oh no, there's no question, because it came contiguously with a number of other things. The anti-war movement against the war in Vietnam brought forth a new version of civil protest and participation. And the key here is bringing somehow participation both through the actual governmental and voting electoral processes and through other means, whether the courts or the press or anything else.
Funding of political parties always becomes an issue, especially in South Africa, as we head towards our the 20th anniversary of the democracy here in South Africa. The impact of money in the American democracy continues to be very big.
I know this is a truly troubling phenomenon, because running an election in a country like 21st century America with 300 million plus people and expensive television advertising and campaigns that stretch for months on end becomes an expensive process. And there's no easy way to fund that save for the process of campaign contributions. But there are all these other mechanisms in which individuals and corporations They don't fund the party per se, and they don't fund the candidates. They fund campaigning on issues. And that's become a very troubling part of the democratic process. Large amounts of money come in that way, and it's not really controlled very well.
Yeah. In your view, finally, and very briefly, what are the lessons that we in South Africa should take from the American democratic journey that started more than 200 years ago?
Well, I think there are two important ones. More elections for more candidates, for more offices, crucially important. Make that the watchword here. But second, and we just touched on it, figure out a way to understand where the money streams are and who influences who and why, and you'll have a better idea of who is beholden to whom for what. And both of those areas are problems that America has not necessarily solved conclusively either, but at least there are some examples and some precautionary notes that South Africans can look at and say, we need to fix this too.
Thank you very much. That's international relations expert Brooks Spector.
Know more about your world.
eNCA.com.